What's going on, everybody? It's the Tom Rowland Podcast, brought to you by Brite, and today we have a fantastic guest, writer Peter Kaminsky. If you don't know Peter's writing, he has written so many books, 18 cookbooks, plus a whole bunch of fishing books. And he's also been a writer for the New York Times, covering cuisine, outdoors, all kinds of stuff. It is my pleasure to bring on Peter Kaminsky. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Peter Kaminsky. My latest book is The Catch of a Lifetime, Moments of Fly Fishing Glory, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
Peter, how are you?
Reasonable. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Are you in New York these days?
I am. I'm in beautiful Brooklyn.
Yeah?
About a block and a half from the harbor.
Okay.
Where I often catch striped bass.
Yeah? Can you just walk down the street with your rods and go fishing?
Well, it's kind of hard to fly fish off the pier, but yes, people do. Somebody caught like a 45-incher, on a bait casting rig last week.
Right on. That's pretty cool. I love it when there's a really good fishery right next to a major urban area. I think that's kind of cool. I always liked the show that Mike Iaconelli did, which was him fishing right in the heart of a city. I just think it's kind of cool for people to have that opportunity right in the middle of a city.
It's just wonderful. I mean, Miami, you can do that. I've done it in Buenos Aires. I've done it in Boston, Philly, Baltimore. It's one of the best things you can do to keep your head on straight in a big city.
Yeah, while you're living in a big city. Yeah, I was checking out your bio, and of course, I know you from your fishing books. You've written The Moon Pulled Up an Acre of Bass, American Waters, Fly Fishing Journeys of a Native Son, The Fly Fisherman's Guide to the Meaning of Life, Fishing for Dummies, and Fly Fishing for Dummies. Those are the ones that were listed on your book, and of course you have a new one. And then your work has been in other books. Like I think I first came across your work on that book, West of Key West. That happened
Right.
when I was just first getting started down in Key West. But you've also written 18 cookbooks, which I didn't actually. I always associated you as a fishing writer, but would you classify yourself more as a cooking writer than a fishing writer, or not?
Well, I've definitely made more money as a cookbook writer, but and I love to cook, but I really love to fish and I love to write about fishing. So I guess I put them in the number one spot on my headstone.
What did you start writing about? Your first works?
Well, I was in my early 20s, and I got a job at National Lampoon.
Well, I got to admit, I saw that on there, and I said, I've got to ask you about being the managing editor of National Lampoon. That had to be an incredible period of time.
Well, it was the time when the radio hour was going, so John Belushi was there, Bill Murray and his brother Brian, Gilda Radner, Alice Playton. It was a wonderful group, and I did that. It was pretty nuts. It was the 70s, and we partook of everything that the 70s offered, and so that's how I started writing.
So were you writing jokes for them and kind of material for them also? Or just the magazine?
There was just the magazine.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I guess I had a couple of jokes on the radio show, but no, I was on the magazine. The magazine was like sort of the mothership.
Right. Man, I remember that magazine. What an incredible time with those comedians, and that's an amazing time.
Yeah, it was.
And so how does that transition into writing cookbooks? I mean, that seems like the most natural progression, to go from National Lampoons to cookbooks.
Well, actually, it was to fishing. Here's what happened. I guess it was 75 or 76. I wanted to take a vacation somewhere warm. And so my girlfriend at the time and we went to the Florida Keys, where it was 39 degrees. So I saw a sign. We were staying in Big Pine, and I saw a sign in Marathon, a party boat, red snapper all day, $9. So something to do. So we went out on the boat. I really hadn't fished much at all before that. And I caught a 35-pound grouper,
Wow.
which isn't big as groupers go, but it made me the high hook for the day. So I won $54. And as the saying goes, I was hooked. So came back north, and that summer rented the garage of Jeff and Maria Moldauer, a wonderful singing couple. And this was in Woodstock, New York. And I would get up every morning and I would go buy sawbellies or alewives, and I'd stick them on a hook and proceed to drown them in the Ashokan Reservoir, and caught some sunfish, and I think one smallmouth bass, which scared the bejesus out of me. And that next winter, we went to the Yucatan, and we went to a resort in a place called Akumal, and it turned out to be kind of like much more upscale and programmed and kind of cruise shippy than I was looking for. So we just got in our car and drove south, and we got to the pyramid in Tulum, and that's a big town now. Back then it was a taco stand and a pyramid. And we made a right and drove down this dirt road and ended up at the Boca Pila fishing camp. And we just had a look around. They invited us for lunch, and there were some old guys there, North American guys, about 50. In other words, much younger than I am now. And they were fly fishing, and it just captivated me. I mean, that can happen to you, when it was definitely love at first sight. So came back north. A friend offered to take me up to the Beaver Kill and show me a thing or two. And as it happened, Doug Swisher, famous fly fisherman, he was giving a casting clinic. So I took it, and it was 2 days of probably the most valuable experience you could have, because at the end of it, I wasn't a tournament caster, but I could cast, I could mend, I could reach, and fly fishing pretty much took over my life. It was a great counterbalance to the nuttiness of Lampoon. And then in early '78, I left Lampoon, or it left me. And so I decided I'd just try and make my life, make a living writing magazine stories. And I started out writing for Outdoor Life. It was run at that time by a guy named John Madison Culler, who put together, won awards for South Carolina Wildlife magazine. And I was sort of the first kind of guy like that they'd ever seen writing for them. And I loved it. And I got to go, I'd been to Europe and all, but I really didn't know America very well. So outdoor writing gave me a chance to go to the South, to the Midwest, which I still go to, which I love. And so I wrote for them. I wrote for Field and Stream. I wrote for Outdoor Life. In the early 80s, Nick Lyons, wonderful, if you're not familiar with his work, he wrote The Back Page, a seasonable angler and fly fisherman for many years. And he's been the guru to my whole generation of outdoor writers. They'd asked Nick to fill in at the New York Times outdoors column because Nelson Bryant was cutting back a little bit. And Nick did a few, and then he said, you should try this guy Kaminsky. And I did, or they did, and I did. And I wrote, 100 some columns for them over the next 35 years. That was just great. They let me write whatever I want. And contrary to New York Times practice, I didn't have to call anybody Mr. or Mrs. anything. I could use their first names, which was a great hall pass to get. And one year, I guess it was '94, I did a series called A Season on the Harbor. And every month I fished in a different place in New York City waters and I'd write about my experience, and about the place and about its history and the characters and all. And for the last story that year, I used to have a Christmas lunch of my college roommate, Vinnie Farrell. And so my daughter and I went out on a headboat from Brooklyn and caught a bunch of blackfish, also known as tautog, just a wonderful eating fish. And I knew the guy who was the chef at 21 Club because he had called me through a friend once to get some advice on fishing gear. And his name is Mike Lamonaco. And so I called up Michael and I said, well, I have all these blackfish that I caught. So if I bring them up, can you cook us lunch and you can sell the rest of them? And he said, sure. And so he did, and I did, and we did. And the Times gave me like more space than they ever had. It was maybe 2/3 of a page. And there was our guru on the boat, a guy named Eddie Dahls, who was the walrus keeper at the Coney Island Aquarium on his day off. You know, in one picture, and there was Mike Lamonaco flipping, you know, like chefs do on TV, his frying pan. And people just loved the story. It got so many responses. So I figured there was something in this food writing. So I started that. And I've been doing both ever since.
Wow, those are amazing stories. Like, one of the things that's interesting to me is like it's one thing to write for Outdoor Life and to write, you know, outdoor stories for an outdoor magazine, but as you have this opportunity with the New York Times, how do you kind of find your voice there? What do you just start writing and people like it right away, or did you have to kind of navigate to what the readers of, you know, of the New York Times seems
Well,
like it's not exactly a perfect fit to start with?
well, the New York Times has a long tradition, no longer because they don't have a sports section, but they had a long tradition of outdoor writing. John Randolph, Dave Anderson, Red Smith, Nelson Bryant, um, McGuane, Tom wrote for
Yeah.
them some. But anyway, I had already sort of established the way I wrote. I usually write things first person in my fishing experiences. You know, I'm sort of like the I character. And I've always tried to let the reader see through my eyes and experience through what I go through. So I'm not the expert in it. I'm usually with someone who knows a good deal more about what we're doing than I do, or has more years under their belt. And so I try and pick up something from them and pass it along. I also learned, because I guess uh, when you read Ernest Hemingway, um, yeah, you want to be fishing, but what leaps off the page is food.
Hmm.
You know, when Nick Adams makes a campfire and eats his trout in the Big Two Hearted River, you're just there. And someone uh, once said to me, you know, it leaps off the page like your own name. So I always put, you know, whether it was a candy bar or a ham sandwich or a steak, something in all my columns. So it really wasn't much of a stretch. I got to write what they wanted and what I did were the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of evolved nicely, and I love doing it.
Yeah. And so when you see this correlation between food and outdoors with this column that you wrote about the blackfish, what direction did that send you in? Like as far as your first kind of food or cookbook that you wrote, how did you kind of
Well,
decide what was your inspiration for that?
well, there's a famous restaurant in New York at the time called Union Square Cafe. And my brother and I, we had a little TV production company, and it was on Union Square, and we used to go eat there. And it quickly became a real favorite of a lot of people. It was just great food and just real great service, but not sort of not snobby at all. And so one day Danny told me he was opening a new restaurant, Gramercy Tavern.
Mm.
And I said, gee, I would like to write about how a restaurant gets put together. So I got an assignment from the New Yorker, which is a big deal. And I followed the opening of Gramercy for 2 years. Tom Colicchio, a great fisherman, and people know him from Top Chef.
Mm-hmm.
Tom was the first chef at Gramercy. So what happened was I wrote that story. It was gigantic, and the New Yorker didn't like it. That happens. So I called up my friend Kurt Anderson, who was editor of New York Magazine. And I said, Kurt, you remember how you said you'd kill for this story? He said, yeah. I said, you don't have to. So he put it on the cover, and it was a big deal. And so there I was a food writer. And so the woman, I think it was a woman at the time, who was writing a column called Underground Gourmet, which is sort of like neat little places in New York, was leaving, and Kurt asked me if I'd like to write it. And I always loved these, hole in the wall, Middle Eastern, Chinese, Hungarian, restaurants squirreled away in little Brooklyn neighborhoods. Because I'd been a cabbie a long time ago. I just love coming upon these joints. So I started writing that for 4 years, and plus some other real big stories in New York when a major place opened. And so I was in the food world, so it wasn't long before I had a chance to collaborate with some chefs on cookbooks.
That's interesting. Our paths have crossed a number of times. Tom Colicchio used to come down to Key West and fish with one of my good friends, Simon Becker, and I was the second guide on that deal with another chef named Carrie Heffernan.
Sure.
And my wife, who's my wife now, I think maybe we were married. Yeah, I think we were married. But Carrie and Tom invited us up to New York, and we didn't have a chance to take a honeymoon because we got married in January, and I had to get right back to work. And I was booked fishing every day. And so I think it was a year later, and I had fished with Carrie and Tom, and they were like, you should come up to New York. My wife wanted to go to New York, and so they treated us to the greatest meals. I went to Gramercy Tavern. Tom Colicchio comes out, treats us as if we are the king and queen. It was the most incredible experience.
Nice.
He was so kind and generous to us. I had never had a culinary experience like that. I didn't even know it existed, that a restaurant could be that good and you could have that kind of attention. And if the chef said, take care of those people, what that really meant. And I mean, we were swarmed with the wait staff, and it was just the greatest thing ever. And then Carrie took me to one of the most unique things I've ever done in my entire life. He took me to a real dim sum in New York, a real one. And it was the weirdest, craziest thing ever. He said, meet me at this location, between 2 blocks or whatever. And there was a door, and you open the door to the longest escalator. I've never even still seen an escalator this big.
Sure.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it might be Jade Palace.
I don't know what it was. I could never find it again. If you gave me $10 billion, I could never find the place again. And we went up there, and it was amazing. It was the craziest experience of a real dim sum in New York, and I have Tom and Carrie to thank for that. But I've kept in touch with both of those guys over the years, and really unbelievably talented chefs, both of them. Fun. That was a great trip.
Well, I still see them at fishing events. We're often seated together, and Tom and Carrie are still great buddies.
Yeah.
With each other, and
Carrie was doing an interesting thing, like sustainable catch, and he was cooking, off unpopular kind of fish like blue runners and Jack Crevalles, and he can make them incredible, right? And he was kind of like, try and, I guess his idea was to take the pressure off of the really sought after species like a snapper or yellowtail snapper or something like that, a grouper that everyone knows, and show people that this other fish that we have tons of is also a really good fish to eat. I thought that was a really great idea from
It
him.
it really is. It really is. I mean, that's what we need to be eating lower down the fish food chain.
Hmm.
They don't all have to be salmon or striped bass or trout from a river or
Yeah, and
I
if you
agree.
if you cook them the right way, they can be fantastic. I mean, there's
Yeah,
so many fish, that people did not consider a top shelf game fish or food fish for a long time. Bluefin tuna was one. One of my
right.
friends in Key West, Tom Pierce, he used to tell me about going to the Bahamas, and they would do these tuna tournaments, and they would catch all these bluefins, and then at the end of them, they would tie them all by the tail and tow them out to the edge of the reef and drop them off. Just let them go. Nobody wanted them, and you certainly wouldn't do that today. I mean, but that wasn't considered a fish that anyone wanted to really eat. Strangely.
Well, I really I've sort of gotten around to I want to catch fish that match the tackle.
Mm-hmm.
So I love baby bluefin.
Mm.
I've hooked to some bigger ones on a fly, and they always win. And it's if you do get them to the boat, you beat the hell out of them. So a 25, 30 pound baby bluefin, same with a baby tarpon. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
When they get really big, you have a big memory, but I don't know.
Right. What tackle would you think would be the perfect tackle for a 25 to 30 pound bluefin?
Oh, I guess I probably would be fishing a 10 weight because
Mm-hmm.
that's as big as I got. But I guess an 11 is probably more matched to it, wouldn't you
Yeah.
think?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, a tuna is a funny fish because it just kind of goes straight down. Like you can land a fish that'll go straight out like a tarpon. You can land a much larger fish like that on a fly rod, I think, because it lends itself to that. It goes a long way away from you, but the tuna is straight down, right? That I remember there were some years where people were catching the smaller bluefin, and they were doing it in an area where it was kind of shallow, and they were really excited about it because I think it may have been Carrie telling me about it that it was only 60 or 70 feet deep or 80 feet deep or less than 100, whatever. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the area, but they didn't have a long way to go down, so they would go down and then they would go out, and it
Yep.
made it a little more doable on a fly rod. And people were trying to get me to come up there, and I missed the window, I guess. But that bluefin tuna fishing has been really good, I think, not just for the big ones, but for the little ones.
We're talking about it. I think I'm happy to be corrected on it, but I think I actually showed Kerry how to cast, uh, and and then he took up fly fishing. And I also think I may have put Tom on his first saltwater fish. They were bluefish,
Oh yeah,
and they were by our friend's house in Laddingtown on Long Island Sound.
right.
Um, I'd be happy to be proven wrong, but I actually think that was the case in both guys.
Huh. Well,
Tom was a trout fisherman at that time. I don't think he'd done any salt
yeah.
water.
Well, you did a good job because they both turned into rabid, crazy fishermen
Oh,
that really loved it. Carrie, we had such a good time fishing. He always would get some really good days. Those guys worked their way into the schedule to where they, for whatever reason, I had some other clients that would pick and just year after year they would get kind of marginal weather, or they would get, they just would never hit it just quite right. But as I remember Carrie, he hit it right. And of course, Tom was in Simon's boat, so he hit it right too. But yeah, those were good times. Um,
oh, I remember those years. That's really great. Well, there you go.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
nice to know.
yeah. It was fun. That was a good time, and the fishing was spectacular then. And you know what else was also good there is, as you remember, I'm sure that Key West had some really great restaurants. And those guys would take us out and show us, like, order everything that was worth ordering on the menu, and kind of taught us how to go out to dinner. You know, I mean, Dan Gerber, you probably remember him. He was one of our friends that we fished with down there a lot. He was a writer in Key West at that same time. Maybe you knew him. I don't know, but
No, no, I didn't. I
he
know the name.
he was a guy that taught us how to go out to dinner and order the right things and experience like you know, it wasn't just getting something to eat. It was like this social thing that honestly at that point in my life, you know, I'd gone out to dinner with my parents. You know, I'm just kind of growing up. I'm like 22 years old, and I'm just kind of learning this, like, oh, this is what you do, and this is how you do it, and this is how much fun it can be. And good times, though, man, good times. That was awesome. You know, another chef that does that same kind of thing. I'm sure many do, but Alton Brown. I went to an event that he cooked. I think he cooked the carp that are in the Illinois River, those ones that jump out of the water and they're just complete overpopulation. It's an invasive species, and he was doing something similar to try to encourage people to eat these fish that are not considered good to eat. I ate it, and again,
Oh,
he did a
carp is great.
fantastic job of cooking it, and that would be probably the best way, I think, to manage a invasive species like that. We're doing it with lionfish.
There's a guy named Ranga Pereira in Montana who's a chef. I think his family is originally from Ceylon, from Sri Lanka. He's got a great background in sort of Indian and South Asian food. And I met Ranga working on a series called Flavor on the Fly that Fly Lords is doing. And they came and shot one in the worst goddamn weather in Brooklyn. I mean, it was blowing a ton and raining, and we cooked in the backyard. But Ranga's a guy worth checking out, you know, on Instagram. He's a really good chef, really great guy.
What part of Montana?
Uh, uh, you know, don't hold me to it. I mean, I'm not sure.
I have
I'm not sure, but in the south, in the south.
okay, well, both my boys went to Montana State in Bozeman, and one of them still lives out there, so I do get out there quite often, or not as often as I'd like, but because I love it out there. But wouldn't surprise me
Well,
if he was in Bozeman.
well, I'll tell you. I remember it was in Bozeman. It was 20 years ago, 25 years ago or so. And I said, uh-oh, maybe fly fishing is in trouble. Because I was walking down the street in Bozeman and I saw like a sign in the store that said, fly fishing fashions. And I never had put those words together in the same sentence before. So I
We
said,
could be
all
in
right.
trouble.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, it didn't. I don't think it stuck. I'm not sure that as fashionable as fly fishermen would like to be, I don't know that it has quite transcended the sport yet.
Yeah, there's nothing sexual about waders.
No, not at all. So from I want to know about this latest book, The Catch of a Lifetime. I read the description of it, and it was pretty captivating. That for me to think about like the most impactful catches to me. They don't always have to be a very large fish or even one that would be any sort of record or anything. But to the individual person, maybe it's something that you've really been, working hard to try to catch this fish, and finally I think about a permit. Like my first permit that I ever caught on fly was not a particularly big one, but I don't think that there's ever going to be one that I was more proud of than that fish, that it finally happened. And I'm kind of reading the inside cover of your book, and I'm thinking maybe it's about that, but I don't know. When you're thinking about The Catch of a Lifetime, what inspires you to write that book, and what direction do you go with it?
Well, it's exactly that. I start out the book saying there are fish that I remember catching that I remember better than a whole years of my life. And it's true. And it's true. So what happened was my publisher, Artisan Books, I had done my third book with Francis Mallmann, the Argentine chef who cooks with fire, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a particularly cool cat. And the third one, it was during COVID, So it was a weird time, and it was a weird book. By the time you get to the third book with a chef, you're really stretching. Um, and so one day I'm talking to the editor and my publisher, and said, I think you owe me a me book. And they said, well, what would you like to do? And I said, well, I'd like to do Through Patagonia with Fly Rod and Fork. And they said, oh, we don't want to do that, but you fly fish. I said, yeah, matter of fact, I do. And they said, well, we have this series, a man and his watch, a man in his car, a man and his guitar. Maybe do a fly fishing book. And I said, all right. Well, a man and his rod doesn't sound right. And probably the biggest growth area in the sport is women. So I gave it some thought, and I said, well, why don't I do this? I'll just ask people, pick me that one memory, just that one, because I'm sure you remember the height of the sun, the temperature, the wind, the place, the trees, the birds, and just write that for me. 500, 1,000 words, something like that. And you remember, we're all sort of, locked in our houses, not seeing many people. So it was a great voyage of discovery for me. I mean, I wrote to people, I didn't know. I mean, I wrote to Carl Hyacin, a writer whose work I really admired. And he gave me a story. I read in the paper that Rachel Maddow fly fished. I said, holy Toledo. I wrote a letter to her agent. Oh, I'm sorry. Uh, and a couple months later, I get this wonderful story about catching a pike. Um, keep getting trying to get rid of to be a polite guest.
That's okay.
John McClane wrote for it. Um, I found there was, I started, so I'm on you know, in the company of fly fishermen on the web, and I come across fly lords, and boy, did I love what they were doing. And through them, and through Steve Duda at Patagonia, I started to connect with writers. I read a story about a little profile of a woman named Katie Kahn. Since become quite well known in fly fishing. Um, and she wrote, or she talked about, she was a cancer survivor and how fly fishing kind of really helped her through things. She had a little baby and a husband. And so I'd been through cancer a couple times. And so I said, all right, well, that's an interesting story. Tell me about that. And so I started to find these really, Nick Lyons, John McPhee. I started to find these well-known people. I came across people you never heard of. I made a real effort to get a bunch of women in the book, and they were just great writers, all of them. And so it sort of came together. And then I, we all, if you're in that world, you probably know the pictures that are in the Sims ads or, Jones Marine ads or whatever. Um, but most people don't see all of them. They don't know the work of those photographers like Andy Anderson and Valentine Atkinson. And there's just a whole bunch of them. And so I said, look, I'd like some photos. We can pay you, for your trouble, but it ain't a lot. But it doesn't matter if they've been published before. I think they'd really go nicely in this. So everybody sent me stuff. And that was great. I guess, no question, writing in the Times for all those years, people knew me more than I had ever thought. When you're a writer, you just sit home and you don't know who knows you or reads you, but clearly it had some reach. So that's how that came together. And then I've just finished a new book. This is for the same company, and it's called The Zen of Fly Fishing. and I wrote like a dozen of my own essays for it, plus a bunch of quotes, from literature, from famous writers,
Yeah, I
and a
noticed that.
bunch of paintings and pictures. And that'll be out in, I guess fall 25 or spring 26. So, uh,
Do you are you obviously you're a quote guy. Do you have a collection of quotes, or did you research the quotes for this particular one?
well, there's some I really love. No, no, I really read around. I really read around. Some are from literature,
Mm-hmm.
and some are from great fishing writers. Um, so they're really terrific. I try to not use the same old ones that we've ever seen.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
was reading through what you sent me, and I noticed the quotes right away. I'm a quote guy. I kind of collect them. Like sometimes I read quotes instead of the whole book. I don't know. I
yeah,
mean,
well,
it's like okay, well, I guess that's the best part of the whole book, and in some cases it is. You can just like this quote summarizes this whole book, and I can just kind of keep it with me. But in other cases, it's like,
well,
you know, that's a quote that can help guide you through a hard time or a good time, or I don't know.
yeah,
I just like
and they
quotes.
put and they put you there. I remember I wanted something on bone fishing, and I just read, and researched, and it turns out Zane Grey,
Mm-hmm.
wrote a little bone fishing pamphlet, and I found a description he wrote about, coming onto a flat, 100 something years ago, and yeah, I've been there, and that put me there. Um, and then C.D. Clark had a wonderful outdoor artist, wildlife artist, had done uh, a painting that I thought captured that. So it was nice how the pieces all sort of fit together.
What do you think? Fishing is a sport I think that has a tremendous amount of literature around it, and especially fly fishing. But when you have someone like Ernest Hemingway wrote about marlin fishing, conventional fishing, I wonder what it is, in your opinion, that makes fly fishing have so much more literature, books, writers than just kind of. I mean, I don't know. You see some bass fishing, you see some, offshore fishing books, but they don't like, they're not like a river runs through it. They're not like, some of these Nick Lyons books. I wonder, what do you think it is about fly fishing that inspires so much more literature?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think I, I bet you the answer has something to do with, in its origins, it was something that English aristocrats could do, and often those guys are living off the fat of the land.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was they had an education and they had to do something to justify their existence. So they wrote about fly fishing because it's what they did. It's the kind of fishing they did. And so then, they sort of created a groove that other fishermen, writers that followed them could fit into. So I think they blazed a path that wasn't hard to follow. Uh, well, that's part of it. The other part of it is there's something, and I've been trying to bottle it and put it into words for years. I don't know what it is, but there's something just about putting the cast out there, or coming back and hauling and putting another one out there. It just feels so nice. It's like it's as if your arm were, you know, 20 yards long and just unfurling nicely. And there's something forbidden or enticing or seductive about seeing, quiet water and a fish feeding, whether
Mm.
that's a trout rising to a dry fly or a bonefish tailing or permit tailing flat. It's just like you're invited, like as a secret visitor to this world. That's how I feel,
Yeah.
and so it kind of does open up your emotions and your feelings. Having said that, it's real easy to go overboard and get really gushy. And, you have to try and keep it all in perspective. It's great. It feels great. Uh, and it feels pretty. I'm not a particularly religious guy, but, it does feel like what I imagine a prayerful moment feels like when it's really happening. And
Yeah,
that and it doesn't have to all be like sedate and quiet. I mean, being in the middle of a feeding frenzy will make you feel more alive than you ever thought you could be.
for sure. It's interesting, like though, with the bonefish tailing on a flat or the permit tailing on a flat or tarpon, just
Hmm.
a glass, it's like a mirror, and all of a sudden one tarpon rolls. I mean, you can be in that same situation and experience the same thing of being kind of this invited visitor into that. That's a really good way to put it, because sometimes you feel like you're kind of treading on an area where, like, one more step in and the whole place blows up, because like you were invited only to here, and you go a little bit further and boom, everything blows up and it's gone, it's over, right?
That's it.
And
That's the word. It blows
yeah,
up.
it blows up. But you could be doing that with a spinning rod in your hand, and you could be doing that with a bait caster in your hand. You could be doing that on the same exact boat in the same exact time at the same exact tide, and it doesn't seem to inspire the desire to write about it in a way that fly fishing has. And maybe it is the equipment and the line, because in your book I was reading the zen of fly fishing a little bit, and there was a moment about the cast and how like you said, your arm feels 20 feet long, and I started thinking about it. I was like, there is something when I would practice fly casting so much, that you do feel like you're all a part of, you're at one with every inch of it, like the fly, the line, the leader, the rod, the cork, the whole thing. It's like you're all at one. And it's not that you can't have that same feeling with a spinning rod, but I guess, I don't know, there is something about fly casting that is incredible. But you can also experience the same kind of thing with archery, right? Like watching the arrow fly, and there has been a good amount of literature on archery and the arrow flight, and that's kind of a zen kind of thing too. Like you have to have it anchored in exactly the same place, and you have to do it kind of exactly the same way. And if you deviate from it just even slightly, the result is not just slightly off, it's way off.
No, I was going to say, well, wing shooting is the same thing.
Hmm.
When you're on it, you feel like you're connected to that bird.
Yes. And the gun.
And well, yeah, I'm saying, it all feels like one thing: the gun,
Hmm.
the flight of the of the the shell, not the shell, the flight of the shot,
Shot.
and then the bird itself. When you connect, I never was that good at it. I mean, I did a fair amount of it, but when you connect, you go, okay, it's on a line,
Yes.
and that's how you feel like when you hook up with a trout.
Yes, for sure. The best I've ever been at shooting was after I went to Argentina. Have you ever been there? You shoot
Me, well, not to shoot.
but
I
to
go
shoot.
fishing there every year.
Yeah.
No,
Well, to one of these years, maybe if you're really mad at your shoulder, you should maybe take a swing at the dove shooting there. It's
well,
it's
sure.
the most incredible thing ever, because there's so many, and if they didn't have hunters going down there to hunt them, they'd be completely overpopulated, and they'd have to just poison them, because those particular birds, I think they reproduce more often than our doves do, and they have a real issue with their doves. But anyway, you can shoot so many down there, and when I came back, I felt like that was the best I had ever shot, and I thought, man, come this fall when it's dove season, I'm going to be so good. I will be the best one in the field, no doubt about it. But that goes away as quickly as it happens
For
to
sure.
you. It
For
is the
sure.
is the strangest thing, because I was hitting birds. I mean, the guide's like, shoot. I'm like, that's too high. He's, oh, shoot, boom, and the bird falls. And you're like, oh my
Nice.
gosh,
Nice.
how did I do that? So now I'm going to try another one, and a higher one, and a higher one, and a higher one. I've never shot one that high, but all of them are falling. And then I'm like, well, I'm going to be able to do that when I get home. Nope. You got to shoot like that every day. That's like when you hear the Navy SEALs, they shoot, more than an entire Marine Corps or something. I mean, just like this ridiculous amount of ammunition. That's why, because once you get there, you have to continue to shoot to stay there, I guess. And it's the same thing with your casting and the same thing with your shooting. But yeah, interesting. So how many stories go into to the zen of fly fishing that you write?
Well, I wrote them all. I think there's 15.
Okay. And you say that comes out when?
That should be out in fall 25, I believe.
Okay. All right. And that's the same publisher?
That will be from Workman, which is the same company as Artisan. It's so yeah, for all practical purposes.
There you go. All right. So, Peter, one thing that we do here is we have kind of a fun little section. Usually I do it in the front, but we got such a good conversation going that I just figured we'll wait till the end. But this is what we call the hot seat. I ask you a series of questions that are kind of either or, kind of fast paced. Don't put a lot of thought into it. And we just kind of work our way through it in order for people to get to know you a little bit better and for me to get to know you a little bit better. So you ready to give this a shot?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you rather text or call?
Text.
Fly or drive?
Drive.
In fishing or cooking, which would you rather write about?
Fishing.
Favorite cuisine at this moment?
That's a hard one. Because I really like it all.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's fair. You can fish as much as you want, but you can only fish for one species. What do you choose?
Brown trout.
Oh, nice. Favorite athlete of all time?
Mickey Mantle.
Favorite chef of all time?
Gray Coons.
Gray Coons. Okay, we'll have to look him up. I don't know him. One destination you'd like to visit for food?
Japan.
One destination you'd like to visit for fishing?
New Zealand, South Island.
Nice. Salt or fresh?
Fresh.
A movie that makes you laugh?
Dumb and Dumber.
Your most productive time of the day for writing?
Oh, that's a hard one too. I guess whenever I can figure out that I need to do it.
Okay. When you're writing, do you write longhand or do you type?
Type.
One thing you've changed your mind on in the last few years?
One thing I've changed my mind on in the last few years. The compulsion to travel.
You want to do it more or less?
No, I don't need to. I don't have a bucket list.
Okay. First thing that comes to your mind when I ask you what you would pass on to an aspiring writer?
Just do it.
Your standard order at a coffee shop?
Standard order coffee shop. Oh, I guess that'd be a cappuccino.
Okay. And then what would you consider your catch of a lifetime?
That would be a trout that I caught. I was with my brother Bob. It was about 6 a.m. on the Esopus Creek, and we bushwhacked to one of my favorite pools, and there was a bank feeder, and I waded out into the stream, and it was up and to the left, and I forget. I think it might have been a PMD that I put over him. And the trout took, it was about maybe 14 inches, but it was just so satisfying. So, yeah, that's the one that's graven in memory.
Nice. I like it. All right. Well, I've enjoyed this very much. Gone from a $50 grouper to an incredible career in writing. You've touched so many people with your writing. It's really cool. So I appreciate you doing this, and we look forward to having you on again, and also getting your new book.
Well, I really appreciate it, Tom. It's been a pleasure, buddy.
Thank you. I hope we'll run into each other in person one day, and tell Carrie and Tom that I said hi when you run into them. All right.
You got it.
That's Peter Kaminsky, and we'll have another guest just like him next week. Well, not just like him. Another great guest next week. All right. Here we go. See ya.